Okay, last but almost certainly not least, we have our sales taxes. This one's going to be a breeze. We're going to fly through this one. So we're going to be A-okay. I think we will be under the hour mark for this week, so we should be good. So now we've got sales taxes, and we're going to do a brief overview of everything. So there are two types of sales taxes that really the world looks at. And again, remember, we're going to skip over quantity supplied not equal to quantity demanded. I just don't think that we have enough time to get that much into the weeds of everything, but we should be fine, right? So an ad valorem tax is something that is most commonly, right? While real people call it the sales tax, most economists call it the ad valorem tax, right? It just means that for every dollar the consumer spends, the government keeps a fraction, which is the ad valorem tax rate, right? So Japan's national ad valorem tax rate is 8%. So if somebody buys a Wii for $40,000, the government collects 8% of that. So that would be 3,200 yen or something like that. And the seller is going to receive the rest, right? The other thing that we're thinking about is a specific or a unit tax, and that's going to be a specific dollar amount um, on every per unit of output. So the big thing here would be percentages, and here would be totals. And although that you can convert between the two, one's going to be like more obvious than the other. So in this section, we're going to look at like what effects does specific sales tax have? Are the equilibrium price and quantity dependent on suppliers or consumers? Is it true that producers pass along consumers? And do comparable ad valorem specific tax rates on equilibrium prices and quantities have equivalent effects on prices and quantities? So this is our sales tax. These are two examples, right? Elasticities, what we just learned, help us understand who will bear more of a burden of this tax. So when we're thinking about do ad valorem and specific taxes have equivalent effects, it may or may depend on what the demand looks like and what the demand curve looks like. So in general, if people just have the general graph and it's the same, it doesn't matter who pays the tax, the price in the equilibrium is going to change the sentence. But when we start thinking a little bit more about if things like what the equilibrium is going to shift down beforehand, we have to think a little bit more. So this is going to be our equilibrium quantity before the sales tax. Now, the way that the sales tax or a per unit tax is going to come into play is remember these P's are price per good. And so this QS, we'll call it prime, is going to change to be P minus, and let's call our tax tau, right? So tau is going to be our squiggly T. So now, if we wanted, this is our new price equation. So now what we need to do is if we wanted tau to be equal to 1.05, then our new QS is going to be 88 plus 40 times um, P minus 1.05. And so QS1 should equal 88 plus 40P minus, oops, um, what is 40 times 1.05? I don't have a calculator on this. This is bad. 42. And so QS1 should equal 46 plus 40P. Um, so when we think about this, now we can set QD equal to QS, 286 minus 20P should equal 46 minus 40P. So 240 should equal minus 20P plus 40, sorry, should equal 60P. And so P should equal 4, and Q should equal 206. Right, and so that if we put this imposed on the producers, that's how the equilibrium you would adjust. Really, it's going to look exactly like what we did before when we were changing the prices just a little bit or changing the prices of inputs. We just have to make sure that we account for the tau on the correct one. If it's imposed on producers, it's going to increase the supply. If it's imposed on consumers, it's going to increase on the demand, right? And so what we're going to call this is now we get into this thing called this incidence of the tax. The incidence of the tax on the consumers is just what the price changes relative to how tau changes. So if we wanted to think about this as a comparative static, it's going to give us a percentage of the change in price followed from the change in tau that is going to be paid for by the consumers. And then 1 minus that percentage is going to be the tax on the firms, right? Seems pretty straightforward. So if we think about this example, right, our original, right, we're going to go 12 minus p should equal 9 plus 0.5p. And if we remember this example from before, our equilibrium price is going to be 3 should equal 1.5p. So p should equal 2 and q should equal 10. Right. Now, let's think about this a little bit more. What is eta and what is epsilon, right? So if we recall, epsilon is equal to, and this is our price elasticity of demand. So it's going to be QD over P, P over Q. And so this is going to be minus 1 at the equilibrium. Should it be minus 0.2? Okay, I think that's correct. I think that's correct. And so our eta is then going to be QS over P. Which should be 0.5 times 2 over 10. And this should be, man, I'm 0.1. So now what happens if then our QD then becomes 12 minus P plus 0.75, right? And the reason that we're adding here is because, like, remember up here we subtracted. This is because this is the price that we are selling at, and our tax is going to take away from the price that we could sell at. Down here, this is the price that we are buying at, and our price is going to be it's going to cost us more to buy it. So we're going to add onto it, right? In theory, if we would just increase the price as a seller to offset the cost of a tax, which is, as many people claim, that producers pass along the taxes. That could be potentially true. Depends on if you're a competitive market or not. And so QD prime now becomes 11.25 minus P. Our QS remains the same. And so combining these together, we should get 2.25 should equal 1.5p. P should equal 2. No, that can't be right. Can't be right. P should equal 1.5? Because that can't be right either. I should stop trying to do decimal math in my head. No, but that's right, 1.5. I just also should probably trust myself. I'm a pretty smart guy. And so if P is equal to this, then Q should equal 9.75, following from here. And so our new eta, right, if we did this now, would be minus 1 times 1.5 over 9.75, which should be Hang on. I think this is going to be a different way that we're going to do. We're going to do this. We already found eta, epsilon and eta. But if we wanted to think of something like the tax burden, um, our producer price is 1.5, but we pay 2.25, right? So if we wanted to think about this as here, right? Then out of that 75 cents, consumers pay this. And producers pay 66.6%. And so let's think about this as a shortcut, right? So if we have this elasticity, right, we can think about this as eta. So if we wanted this, I think we're going to get it. I think we're going to get down to here. Yeah, let's talk about tax burdens here. We'll elaborate a little bit further more so that this is not so weird. Right? So our DDPT, right? We want to figure out what the effect of this tau is here, right? So we want to figure out this price. This is what we're curious about, right? And so we're going to do elasticities to get this shortcut on this. So let's just start deriving. We're going to take the direct effect, the indirect effect, times dp d tau should equal this indirect effect here. And we know this is going to be dds dp times dp d tau minus 1. And so if we have dp times dp d tau should equal ds dp times dp d tau minus 1. If we wanted to isolate dp d tau, we could first, I guess, let's distribute and then subtract, right? And then subtract over. So we're going to get ddp minus ds dp times dp d tau should equal ds dp. And so then dp d tau should equal ds dp over dd dp minus ds dp. Or it's equal to eta, which is the difference in quantity supplied following, the price elasticity of supply following a change in price, over epsilon minus eta. And so if we wanted to think, and this is going to be the tax incidence on consumers, is going to be eta over epsilon minus eta. So if we come back up here, right, we calculated this eta and epsilon. We're going to get 0.1 over minus 0.2 minus 0.1. And I know that this is minus 0. I know that this is going to be negative here. But again, we're thinking about these in percentage terms. And so this is also where that 33.33% will come. These would be if you solved for eta and epsilon from these. If you wanted to do that example, you would be more than willing to, more than welcome to. I think it would be a great way for you guys to practice. Alternatively, right, because this is a percentage, if you wanted to get the tax incidence, why is this in, oh, tax incidence on producers, you would just do 1 minus, and you'd be good because you would just be taking the other half of the percentage, right? So if we pay 33%, somebody else has to pay the other 66%, and we will be A-OK. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about here is just kind of a brief overview of what we do, right? So this framework really only works in competitive markets, right? The only reason that supply and demand works is that invisible hand pushing us closer to the equilibrium, right? And the reason that the invisible hand works is if you assume that it is competitive. Like you assume that people will walk away from a deal if things aren't good enough for them. And that's a good thing, right? It happens a lot. That's what normally exists in a market. We're going to get into monopolies and monopsonies close to the end of the year, or the end of the term, the end of the 3 weeks. But for the most part, it's going to just be these competitive markets. And so the competitive markets is just means that the market has many buyers and sellers. So if one person has a bad deal, they can just go to something else. If a seller is getting nobody wants to buy, they can just look at somebody else. All firms produce identical products. All market participants have full information about the prices and characteristics of products, and transaction costs are negligible. Firms can easily enter and exit the market. That's it. That's pretty much all that we are going to be doing for this chapter. Hopefully that the assignments are going to be posted here soon if you wanted to, but if you wanted to get started on the material, this is great for you. Thanks.